You've often spoken about how you enjoy the process of doing research for your projects. How do you know when you've done enough research? It seems like research could go on indefinitely. What is your benchmark for knowing you've got enough to move forward? So those are two different questions, Casey. How do you know when you've done enough research? And what is your benchmark for knowing you've gotten enough to move forward are two different things. The second one, I think, is the more refined question. I'm going to answer that one. So I've just been working on, for the last few weeks, I've been working largely off camera on this Tintin's boat, the Sirius. There is a 1.2 meter 35th scale model of it, this big, on eBay right now, a couple $100. Go get it. That's so cheap for a balsa wood model. And it is a nicely shaped model. Like, the whole shape is a nice, refined piece of model making. And so I've been doing tons of research on, and actually this is the first time I've been using a bit of AI, specifically to do research on 1930s Belgian fishing trawlers, of which Tintin's ship is based upon, one specifically called the John O.88. This comes out of the Ostend shipping town in Belgium. Anyway, I have so many questions as I'm putting this together. Like, what kind of crap was there on the deck? What do the interiors look like? Where does the captain sleep? Who else is building ship models? And I literally just did a piece of camera yesterday about the model in which I was talking about looking at so when I'm doing a project like this, I'm not just gathering all the pictures of model kits that people have built. I'm also gathering every picture of the original. I'm also looking for specific questions. What does the wheelhouse look like? What does the rigging look like? What do the blocks and the sheaves look like? And then I'm making folders for each of those for research. And then I'm getting interested in, well, I noticed looking at all the model build downloads that there was a specific sort of quality level. And if you go looking at ship models and you find people selling them on eBay or Etsy in the $1,000 to $2,000 range, you're going to find in general a very consistent level of buildsmanship on those models. And it's really serviceable and it's really clean, but there's no weathering to it. There's no sort of paint gestalt to it. It doesn't quite cohere to me. These are lovely things, but they're just things. And when you weather a model, and there's this one guy named Ken Wong who has a version of the Sirius up that's magnificent, and it's on Facebook. So I start to notice that there's like this wide variance in build quality, and I'm like, is anyone building ship models to a super high level of quality? And then I find it at our ship models. And yeah, it turns out private people building ship models for themselves do way more incredible and extensive and deep, beautiful detail work than the commercially available ones. This makes total sense. Of course it does. So for me, I'll be researching stuff and I'll have a question. Hey, is this as good as models get? And I went home and I told my wife, like, the level models get to, it's weirdly low. And then the next day I was like, hey, by the way, I found them. I found the ones that were making really good stuff. That's not necessarily information that helps me move forward, but for me, research yields questions, and the questions are where stuff gets interesting. That's what happens for me, is I do enough research where I feel like, okay, I don't necessarily have a definitive answer to what it looks like in the wheelhouse of Tintin's boat, but I have enough wheelhouse reference that I now feel like I can populate this room with what I need. Now I'm going to light my models, so I'm actually going to make the interior of the wheelhouse a little brighter than they normally are because I want it to be visible. And I'm only able to make that call having done enough looking inside wheelhouses. And it's non-trivial to find wheelhouses of Belgian trawlers. There's not a lot, and I will say I've had a lot more luck. This is going to shock everybody lately with Bing. And this is specifically because Bing does searching in foreign languages. So I finally found these like Belgian and French and German model making sites where people are trading information about Tintin's ship. So yeah, my research brain reached a high level of refinement while making Mythbusters, because for 13 years I was regularly engaging with material I had no former experience with frequently, and I had to learn enough about it to tell a story about it and make that story have depth to it that someone who is an expert in the field would feel like we represented it fairly. And so my research process for stories like that on Mythbusters was read. Like, get me an expert, I'm going to talk to them on the phone, I'm going to read papers, abstracts, I'm going to fire hose information in my brain. And always at a certain point in that process of fire hosing it in, I start to see a landscape. New information comes in and I know where it goes. Right, okay, that's part of this, there we go. And then this landscape, everything for me is physicalized, right? So this landscape gets physical and then I have a question and I can't see it answered in any of the landscape of the subject I've assembled. And most often that question I had was the handle with which I shook loose the story. Mix your metaphors as you please. So yeah, to me, there's a period of just mystification where information comes in, and I talk about this in my creative projects folder. I just dump everything into the top level folder. Everything on the subject I can find. And then a few days after that, and this is the same with Tintin, I just do Google searches for Tintin, Sirius, Red Rackham's Treasure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then after a few days, the files in that folder begin to group themselves. Oh, these are real trawlers. These are model trawlers. These are illustrations. And I start to break it down. And again, as that process matriculates, questions show up. And those questions are, in my experience, the most important part of the process for me. Great question. Jordan Freeman wants to know, did I ever meet Steve Irwin? Yes. Yeah, my wife and I spent about 90 minutes with Steve and his lead producer in a Discovery Channel green room somewhere in the world. I really don't remember where it was. It could have been Orlando, it could have been DC, but somewhere we were doing some event, and he and I were both appearing at this event at different times. And it was lovely to spend 90 minutes around him. He is exactly, in his manner and affect, was exactly as you'd imagine. But sometimes when you meet people with that amount of an outward personality on television, in my experience, I've met some of these folks where the interpersonal isn't something they're necessarily very good at. Irwin was not one of those. He was incredibly kind and a marvelous listener. We were both part of the Discovery family, so we had some complaints to share and some fun dishing to do. Yeah, that was really, really lovely experience. There was this group of kids there. There was this group of kids there that were like part of a Discovery Kids show. So, they were all in their mid to late teens. And these are all the exact kind of kids that would be cast to host a science-based teenager show. These were all theater kids. And they were like all taking photos and like singing together. And like there was the kids were a vibe, and there was like 8 of them. And when Steve Irwin came in, they were like, oh, and they go over to him and they're like, Steve, tell us about Africa. And they all like literally was like this. And they array around him. And Steve Irwin, who spent so much time in Africa, talks really eloquently and beautifully about Africa, the place, which is so many different Africas. And he describes the sort of bracket of things he's seen from the highest elevation to like just people suffering the most terrible privations. And as he's giving them this incredibly realistic portrait of Africa, you can see that they are not prepared for a real world answer to this question. What is Africa like? Well, Africa is a lot of things. People can be incredibly cruel to each other, and they can be incredibly brilliant, and all of this plays out there. And as he was doing it, my wife said it was almost like watching someone describe the horrible parts of a true crime podcast to Smurfs. Not saying that these kids were Smurfs, but their life experience was low enough that you could see the kind of shock on their faces taking in this real answer that Steve Irwin was giving them to what's Africa like. He wasn't like, oh, it's great. It's just like, it's like that flag you see and everything's great. He gave a real answer. And I, again, mad respect to him for giving a genuine, cogent answer to that question. Yeah, I've met a few of my heroes like that, and he was one of my favorites. Want to ask me a question during a live stream? Become a tested member by clicking the join link right around there somewhere.